Hello, insane children, and welcome to yet another of our crowd design sessions. This is actually the second start of the session for today for reasons that we will not get into, but this is technically session number 15, which is being hosted on our Discord server. Today we are going to talk about Alice Madness Returns and a brief overview document that has been prepared for a potential publishing partner. We are doing this so that our insane children can have a glimpse into some of the minutia that goes into business development when trying to convince publishing partners and potential financiers to get behind this project so that we can bring this product to market. We do host these every other week on our Discord server. That is a perk that is given to those insane children who are supporting us over on Patreon. I believe it's at $5 per month and above. So if you're interested in joining along with one of these live, do check out the links in the description below. And if you are listening to this over on YouTube, that includes you, Hamish, and all your insulting comments, we do advise that you not comment along as if this is live now, because on YouTube it is, of course, uploaded after the fact. So yeah, if you want to join us live and get your comments heard, do click the link in the description below for Patreon, and that's how you get access to our Discord servers, which is where we are hosting this today. So with that out of the way, anything from our mods or our insane children that we should point out?
No, just welcome everyone. The Discord chat. Hope everyone has a great time.
Time to make the sausage.
It is time to make the sausage. Martin, you sound like you're coming in over an old-timey radio from World War II era.
Really? Oh.
It's not bad. You just, maybe if you said, blimey, they're dropping the bombs over Piccadilly Square.
Blimey, governor. Get to the shelters. Scarpa.
Perfect. All right. So we're going to take a look at this Alice Asylum. I guess you'd call this a brief. That's what I've called it. And this is meant to entertain the eyes of people within a corporation who have perhaps more money than sense. And apparently, though they are considering funding and publishing the new Alice game, they don't seem to have much awareness about what the Alice games are actually about. So they've asked us to prepare a brief primer on what it is that we're pitching. And so I did upload that over on Discord. Insane children who are with us today, welcome. Make sure you go into, I believe it's the announcements channel, and click on that PDF and download that. So there you go. I am now looking at that PDF, and we are on page 1. We can start to step through this really quickly, and then I think what we'll do is we'll ask our insane children if they have specific feedback to share. And of course, if you have feedback and you have a microphone that's functioning, even if it's one that sounds like it's coming from a 1942 underground bunker somewhere in the heart of London, you can indicate your willingness to participate by throwing out the bloody microphone emoticon. So get ready for that. So this starts off page 1 with the brief saying Madness Begins, which I think is kind of fun because actually Alice Asylum would be where madness begins, especially for those of you who played Madness Returns. That reference makes a lot of sense. Innocence belies a heart of darkness is a tagline that Alex put in there, I believe, in reference to sort of the shadow motif, sort of Alice having to integrate her shadow self in order to move on from the events of this particular game. And of course, it's marked off as the third Twisted video game in the American McGee's Alice series. So right here on page 1, we have run into one of my pet peeves, and that is the word twisted. I'm not a big fan of that word, Alex, or anybody else out there who's listening. So yeah, I try to avoid that. If I had to use a word, it might be wicked, or it might be surreal, or it might be anything. But for some reason, every time I see the word twisted, I just immediately think of, I don't know, not our game.
It makes me think of Twisted Metal.
It makes me think of Twisted Nipples, if I have to be honest, and it just doesn't.
Can't we have both?
I don't know. Anyway, I'd rather we're not twisted. Wicked is okay.
I love Wicked. Wicked is
Yeah.
It's fair.
Yeah. I like Octo Chicken. Greg has said, it's wicked. I can't do a Boston accent, but I understand he's trying to
It's
get a
wicked fucking tastic, gunna.
There you go. Alice on Elm Street says, how about warped? I'm also not a big fan of that. I don't know. The words in that sort of category of twisted, warped, they don't do it for me. I think part of it is maybe they feel a bit modern, and I'm not a big fan of the modern interpretation of twisted, warped, whatnot. So anyway, moving on to page 2. We have outlined that the purpose of this document is to provide a concise and informative overview of the Asylum game and vertical slice demo development. And we're assuming that the reader has never played or researched the previous Alice games, which, given the audience this is being put in front of, that's actually almost a bit of a dig. Like, it's slightly insulting. But I suggest we leave it in there because that's just the kind of people that we are. And it says here that it's been written and prepared in confidence by American McGee and the Alice Asylum pre-production team. That is also including you, the Insane Children, exclusively for an entity which shall not be named, unless I mistakenly uploaded the version in which the entity is named, and in which case, keep that to yourself. So yeah, we've got a couple of suggestions, macabre and surreal instead of twisted. Yeah, I would much prefer that. Bizarre, maybe, but bizarre kind of could be like a cat riding a bicycle. I feel like we need a bit more than that. Surreal works, macabre definitely works, and dark, yeah, dark just suggests that somebody needs to turn the lights on. I think we're a bit beyond that. So I think macabre is good, and a lot of other people are saying that. Curious, says Mad Mischief. I agree. Curious is actually a good one because curiosity is at the heart of our game loop, which we're going to get to later on. Connor Carbon says, I wish we could get more context on the publisher, who they typically publish to. This is like submitting a job application. You tailor it heavily to each company and position, so it's hard to know how to tailor without context. So Connor, this is I think an interesting point. It's well stated, and it makes a lot of sense. But I would like to shed a bit of light on this situation based on 20 plus years experience of making these sorts of pitches. Ultimately, it has been my experience that it just doesn't matter. We are sort of firing a shotgun down a dark hallway in a building which we were teleported to through some form of like time and space machine, and we don't actually know like where we are, what we are doing, or what the end result's going to be. That is actually how bad these pitch processes can be. And if you understood that this document we've written up doesn't even really need to exist, if the party to whom we're pitching, I don't know how to answer this question, but what you're saying makes sense and it seems rational. The problem is this process doesn't make sense and it's not rational. So I don't know how to state that more differently.
Perfect for an Alice game.
Yeah. What we've typically seen is that we are going to spend a lot of effort pitching a lot of different parties on these types of things, and they're going to ask us for lots and lots of additional details and budgets and plans, and at the end of the day it's all going to be for naught. It's the Shakespeare quote of sound and fury signifying nothing, and the person who ultimately ends up greenlighting and saying yes to this will never ever have seen the work that we did. This is all like busy work for the people down below. and or the entity, the group that finally says yes, will just say yes. They won't ask all these questions. They won't demand all this information or work on our part. They'll just come along, look at what we're doing and say, hey, that looks great. Here's a bunch of money. Go do it. Every single time that I've got a project greenlit, it's been in that sort of context. It's just the person comes along, looks at it and goes, yay, do that. It's never requires all this kind of busy work. All right, scrolling down. Yeah, I think we're good on this. Connor says we should all start with this. GDC, 30 things I hate about your game pitch. Yeah, I mean, these sorts of overviews, they're kind of fun and funny to watch. But again, Connor, one of the things to understand is that a lot of times it doesn't matter. Your game pitch and its viability is sometimes more about just simply the person whose desk the thing lands on and the mood they're in that day, and less about the quality or content of the pitch that you're making. So I guess that's one way of saying that we're actually doing a bit of busy work here, and the final value of it I don't know how to quantify. But I wanted to do this today so that everybody got a sense of what it's like to go through this process. Because here's the thing, in the time that we've been trying to get Alice Asylum off the ground, we've done a lot of this. It's just you haven't seen all of it. There's been a lot of phone calls, there's been a lot of meetings, there's been a lot of documents and information shared, and it all just kind of goes into a black hole and never comes back. So I mean, you just have to keep doing it until at some point, like a light turns on somewhere and you get a yes. Alrighty. Any questions? I think we're good. We're going to move on to the table of contents, aka the questions to answer. And so that includes what is the game, which I think we all know, but apparently the person who we're pitching this to doesn't. What is the story? What is the game loop? What are the game session lengths? What is the production plan? And why did we decide on the tech that we have decided on? So that is the questions to answer. Now, I'm hoping that a couple of you may have additional questions to answer, or things that, like, if you lived in an underground bunker in 1942 and you were teleported to this crowd design session and you had questions, you might ask those. You might ask us to put that information in here.
You might want to quickly explain what a game loop is so people know what that concept is.
Well, the person who asked for this document specifically asked for game loop, and I'm hoping that he didn't just pick those words out of a hat. So I guess that would be one place where maybe we don't have to explain to him the very thing he asked for. Would you like me to explain that for the context of the conversation we're having now, though?
I think it might be useful for the insane children to know. Not everyone might get what it is.
Yeah, sure. That's fine. So a game loop is essentially, just imagine you're already playing a game. Like recently I was playing Days Gone, and I'm already in the game, but I come back to my console, I power it up, and wham, there I am, sat on my motorcycle out in the wilds of, Oregon or somewhere that it takes place. You're sat in the game loop almost from the beginning, and one of the essential elements of many games in terms of their loop is just the simple movement through the world, aka exploration. And then exploration leads to perhaps a puzzle or a bit of combat, and then that stuff can trigger a bit of story being told, which can then further your exploration. But then in your exploration, you get to something that requires, jumping your motorcycle in a sick jump over a bridge. So that might be considered a spatial challenge. And then games are essentially defined by, their narrative, and then this loop and the degree to which each of these elements is displayed within the game. So for instance, some games are very heavily exploration and crafting centered. So like take Minecraft for an example. They're in the original version, there's no real narrative. There is a little bit of combat, but it's actually easily avoided and it's pretty rare. There are no puzzles, but you do have tons of exploration. You have tons of building, and you kind of have, I guess, something that, a little bit of spatial challenges just in terms of like not digging a hole down into the lava. And then other games will be much more heavily narrative driven or much more heavily combat oriented. Just so everyone's clear, like if I had to point to an exemplar in modern games of the kind of game loop and the balance that we might be going for, you could look at the most recent God of War. I think that was actually pretty well balanced towards the type of mix that we might be leaning towards for our game. So yeah, that's the game loop. Any other questions on that topic? Or concern about us making God of Wonderland War? Okay, so Nebula Eyes is asking, how long is gameplay? How long is the game time from start to finish? This is actually a really difficult question because what we're asking for as a top line budget is say $30 million US, but I think we could actually get a game done that everybody would be happy with for $20 million. The difference between a $30 million and a $20 million game is going to basically come down to the size of the game and the density of the assets that are contained within it. So the particular party that we're pitching this document to right now has actually come back saying that they would give us less than what I think is the minimum requirement, but they've also stated that they could be convinced to spend more, which I actually think is fairly counterintuitive. You know, it's sort of like, hey, we're gonna ask you to build an airplane that we're all gonna fly in, but we're not gonna give you enough money to put proper wings on it. So then we may all die. And I think that is that's not very constructive or helpful. Instead, I think we should be pointing at, say, a minimum play time that we're all happy with. So, for instance, maybe we all feel like getting 20 to 30 hours out of this game is sufficient. And then what we try to do is balance the budget against the density of the assets that we want to see in a 20 to 30 hour gameplay experience. As far as putting that number into this, I hesitated to do it because I'm actually planning on maybe pointing out the lack of logic in the way that this particular group are coming at their decision for how much they might spend on the game. Because it's not for a lack of funds that they're suggesting that. It's for maybe a lack of faith. And so that's something we may get to later.
You also, in part 4, go over session length instead of how long the game is, which I think is an important aspect of it.
Yeah, well, a session length is essentially how long do you sit down at the game for any one length of time. And again, trying to kind of keep this in the context of what is normal behavior. Because there's times where I'll have a session of sitting down to play a game that could go, say 4 or 5 or 6 hours. And then there's other times where I'll sit down and just play from like one mission to the next, which might only take a half hour or an hour. This is tough. This is, again, a question that was asked by the party to whom we're pitching. I sometimes kind of question why these questions exist, because there's so much variability in them. But when the question is asked, we're forced to answer it. So here we are. We have Ice Killer saying change installations to installment. In like previous installations, I'm guessing he's referring to...
In the PDF, it looks like a mistype. I'm notated it.
Yeah, which page is that?
Page 2, second paragraph on the left.
Like previous installations. I see. So that should probably be installments. Yeah. Okay. That's a good point there, Ice Killer. We should...
My PDF says installment.
You might have the super secret PDF that we can't see, Martin.
Yeah, so Underground Bunker Man, are you looking at page 2, which is marked as 2 at the bottom of the page itself? And the second
Yeah.
paragraph, developed for PC and consoles using the Unreal 4 engine, Asylum is, like previous installations, a narrative-driven.
Right. Apparently, I'm looking at a different PDF.
That's weird.
Huh. I just clicked on the one that was in the chat. How odd. Anyway, moving on.
Mine
Yeah, that's
also
odd.
says installations.
Are you sure you're looking at the same? Anyway, Martin, maybe we'll come back to this later because I'm looking at
Yeah.
installations and we'll fix this. Yeah. Okay, so Connor says, if I was from a 1942 bunker, I'd ask who's going to play this? Why do they care? What will they pay to visit the game? And how long will they stay in it? How will it impact them? And how will it drive them to come back to visit again? Yeah, I like these kinds of questions. Apparently, this group that we're talking to have already done this work, which is how they came up with their estimates for the sales, and that's how they came to arrive at their idea for what kind of money to spend on developing the game. And I've not seen that information yet, but they say they've done all this market research. And so I'm afraid that if I were to go in there and try to make a stab at providing that information, mine would be purely based on, speaking with the insane children. It wouldn't be, I think, the kind of in-depth market research that this group claims that they're capable of doing. Let's see here. Let's scroll down. Nabby says, what about replayability? I hope the first play is scary. Yeah, replayability is an important topic. I think that I don't know that we have a great place we could put that into the game loop page, section 3. We could have something here where it says that one of these features offers a bit of replayability. So let me put that into my notes. Okay. Connor says, for what it's worth, I love single-player campaigns that are increasingly difficult and use your same character gear currency upgrades, yet still challenge you on the second playthrough of the campaign, like Dead Space 1 Champions of North. Yep, I understand that, and it sounds like a good point. I think that, I think we're going to definitely try to work something like that into the game here. Scrolling down, let's see what else we've got here. Oh, I see what's going on. So, Martin, you're looking at the document, perhaps, which was the original thing that I typed up, and then we're looking at the PDF, which is the thing.
No, I found the problem. I was looking at the paragraph on the right of the page, not the left of the page. It says installments on the right and installations on the left.
Yay.
Yay, okay. Mystery solved.
That could be part of our game loop, identifying differences in the text. Okay, so Krim says regional market research can mean a lot. MMOs and mobile games, to my knowledge. Yeah, I'm not sure what that comment is in reference to, but the groups that we've talked to, I mean, they primarily ignore markets like, say, China, where the business is focused on mobile or MMO or online. So this presentation is going to, I guess, what you'd call a Western retail. Used to be box product, but of course everybody's switching to their online digital stores. This would be one of those types of publishers. So, but I'm hoping that we're not sort of playing the let's guess the potential partner game here, because I'm not interested in that. So Greg says, while the words are more important than the art of this pitch, there are 2 art points that jumped out at me flipping through this. One, if someone has never heard of the Alice series, I'm not entirely sure that the current cover image is captivating enough for the uninitiated. Is this a medical game, or is this one of those Outlast games? Should the cover be something that immediately says, hey, this is unique, and captures the curious and macabre vision of Asylum? So, for example, out of the current art, the one with Alice standing in the asylum with all the equipment floating around her is much more striking and immediately captivating. Okay, so on this point, Greg, good point, and it's a good question. I think we still have a couple of options for choosing art. So why don't we get a kind of a consensus on what would be the best cover image? Because this was something I was talking to Omri about yesterday, and I picked the current piece over another piece that was suggested for there. But I think maybe the Insane Children would be a great focus group to work together and suggest what is the cover image here. My request was it be something akin to sort of the main marketing image or um, the main box art. So if you all would kindly put together your list of sort of the top three of the images to fill the front here, that would be awesome. Okay, Greg's second point. Also, never been a big fan of the art on page 2, the AMR cover art. I am scrolling to that. Okay. Maybe something else should go here as well. A uniquely Asylum piece of art. Maybe something, perhaps the Twin Alice's art, which might even make an uninformed reader wonder, oh, what's going on here? Yeah, that's cool. I think this is a fair comment as well. No point in recycling the cover art from Madness Returns, especially when the main character for this pitch is the younger Alice. And so we don't want to sort of mislead the reader into thinking that it's somehow connected to the last game in terms of the character's age. And I have to say, like, the Cheshire Kitten that's on page 3, I'm not a fan of that piece of art. I don't feel like it speaks to where we're going with the product. And it feels a little disjointed in terms of render style with the other art that's in the presentation. So I'd like to see that swapped out as well. But that's why we're having this call.
Out of curiosity, what was the other print that you and Omri were discussing, other than the Welcome to Rutledge one at the top?
He had picked what we call the cover 1 and cover 2 series. So Arcadia has posted what I believe is that's the one with all the medical equipment floating around. That's
cover
one of the cover
1.
Yeah, so Omri has suggested cover 2, which is the image of her with sort of the burning portal through to Wonderland behind.
Right.
If I had, and that's not one of my favorite images, so if I had to pick one, I would actually go for one of the one that Arcadia Taylor has posted here, which is the one with all the equipment floating around in the background. That one's pretty cool. We'll have to swap that logo out though, because that's the old logo on that image. All right, so I'm just scrolling down here. Connor jokingly says, scrap the project and make a hidden object mobile game. Yeah. Connor says, I agree with Octo Chicken that it would add that there's not enough striking contrast and simplicity in the header visual style. It doesn't grab, it doesn't convey unless someone spends time digging into that image. Yeah, so we will get the art swapped out, but I think that's part of the point of this call, is to get all of your brains combined together on what to put into those slots where we have places for imagery. Late But Lucky says, I love the flamingo one. And I also really love the flamingo image. I don't know that unless it's like we're proposing like a bloody animal, sort of Animal Crossing game. I don't know that having her posing with a gutty bird is the picture that we're going for. Right. Arcadia says these are my top 3. I'm with you on the one that shows her in the asylum, less so on the other 2 because I don't know that they do the work of conveying the setting. That's one of the reasons why I like the cover image that I've got on there right now, is because it does show her. First of all, she's young. Second of all, she's in the asylum and clearly distressed by having the head shaved and everything. Third, she's got the rabbit in hand, which is a critical kind of companion element to the game. And then lastly, there is this sort of impersonal, surrounded by all these people who have their backs to her. There's clearly a kind of horror thing going on here. And so I think there's a lot of work being done in the image, but I can understand why there's concern that it may not speak to Wonderland enough. Okay. What other questions or comments do we have here? Yeah, Magus has posted up the Red Cheshire poster. That's a really good one. That could definitely be a cover image. I think the Shadow Alice one is good, but there's so much detail in it. I'm not sure that it's going to work as a cover image because I'm not sure that it conveys a very sort of specific or clear story. But definitely we'll have that on our list. Okay. Just scrolling through your comments here in terms of pictures that we have as selected images. But let's keep this kind of picture and art image selection process going. Nebula has just posted up the one with her surrounded by tentacles. I think that is another potential fantastic one for the cover. This is part of the problem. The difficulty is we have so much great art. So I think choosing what goes on the cover of this presentation is not going to be an easy task. Okay, let us get back to the presentation itself. So on page 2, we were looking at installations versus installments. So what is the game is the first section, and we do detail a bit here. We explain that this is the third game, and we also state that this is being developed for PC and consoles and using the Unreal 4 engine. These are all fairly critical points. And we are describing it as a narrative-driven third-person action-adventure game with lots of puzzle-solving, platforming, and psychological horror. Alex added in this next paragraph that the games retain a long-standing cult following. Previous installments are renowned. I think that's supposed to be renowned, the ED at the end. Is that right? Bueller?
I think it's renowned.
Okay. So they're renowned for their use of dark horror, serene beauty, and equal measure. Both elements are key visual and storytelling staples. We're going to have to work on this paragraph because if I can't read it smoothly, then no one's going to read it smoothly. Page 2 of this is related to the story. So we do outline that the protagonist is 13 years old, which I think is a critical point, and that she, at this point in the story, is a prisoner within the asylum, and that she's going to go into Wonderland to deal with her psychological trauma. We are also stating here that the entire narrative is built around post-traumatic stress disorder, and that it's going to lay itself out along the stages of PTSD, and that Alice's goal here is to confront and defeat what threatens to destroy her. We then describe briefly her arsenal and her helpers. So I guess one of the questions is, does this go far enough? It was, my intention was to try to describe as quickly and cleanly as possible all the stuff that we're working on, because I'm afraid that the people we're putting this in front of will not want to get bogged down in details.
I hate to use the word, but I would love to just have the word iconic because people represent that with the Vorpal Blade, and that's just a part of the series. I know, no iconic, I know, I'm just saying.
So you're saying that in reference to the Vorpal Blade, or in reference to which?
The Vorpal Blade.
Uh-huh. So you would insert iconic with the iconic Vorpal Blade.
Correct. It's almost, when you consider Vorpal Blade, you think of American McGee's Alice.
Sure. Yeah. There's one of the challenges with the Wonderland series, the Alice series, is so much has become a part of popular culture. From the Cheshire Cat and his grin, to Mad as a Hatter, to the Vorpal Blade, to her dresses. But I can certainly try to find some space to fit that in there. Scrolling through the chat, it seems we're still talking a bit about the artwork. On the topic of art, says Connor, whatever people says attracts them to pay attention to something, that's the one to use. Don't overanalyze it. Just whatever moves a human being to say, oh, wait. So that's exactly on point, Connor. I actually think that so much of what we're doing here ultimately comes down to the art that's contained within the presentation. And in fact, there are a number of analysis done by psychologists and influencers where they showed that when you try to put images alongside text, especially when somebody's doing a PPT overview like a speech or a keynote or something or a TED Talk, that our brains basically only operate on one channel or another. It's either visual or it's audio slash reading or hearing. So a lot of the work in this presentation is actually going to be done by the style. So for that, I want to give Alex really high marks that he's turned a basic black and white Word document into something that has a character and a feel to it, which is fantastic. And then it's the artwork that we select. And so we should really heavily focus on what sort of imagery are we going to put in here that's going to convince executives that, oh man, yeah, this is the thing we want to fund. So let's do focus on that. Let's see, we've got Connor saying, copy paste the document into Pro Writing Aid. Yeah, I am very aware of that, and we'll get some of this grammar and the writing stuff cleaned up a bit. Late But Lucky says, last thing on the cover, I like the flamingo one because flamingo croquette is a big thing in the original interpretation of Alice. I know you don't want Alice Crossing, but it has me immediately asking the question, what the hell is going on with this game/series? Moving on. As someone that's both a huge fan of Alice and this series, played the first one when it came out, I think that the whole what is the story page, you should spice up the language around Wonderland a bit. When most people think Wonderland, they think of the Disney movie, which I don't think gives the right idea and seems very overdone. Alice escapes to Wonderland, but not the Wonderland you might think or remember. It's a surreal / disturbed fantasy realm where her psychological trauma. Yeah, I think that's a fair point. We should probably try to get something communicated here. And this is probably a space for visual communication. So I'm thinking that on the page after or before what is the story, first of all, that Cheshire Kitten could go away. And we might replace that with something that is very distinctly disturbed. And then there could be a page over, which would be page 4, that is a full page image. And that image somehow also communicates very distinctly the disturbed nature of her vision of Wonderland. So let's let me make a note here on that. If I can figure out where my note thing is. All right. So we will take care of that note. Good one there, Late But Lucky. Flamingo, says Luca. Pickle, says Hysteria. Flamingo says Arcadia. All right. Octo Chicken Greg says, as a final art thought, is that like a fart thought? Final and art? It should be not for us, not for the fans, but for someone who has no idea with what's going on in the series and needs to immediately see this is curious and catch some visual. Yes, that's right, Greg. We need an image that immediately sells everything that we're talking about here to the person who writes the check for the millions of dollars. So yeah, the art selection is going to be really important, and we will continue to think on that. Connor says, no, iconic, lol. Yes, that word is a bit overused, Connor, but we're gonna give it a look. Nabby says, oh, how about a picture with her in the bed and the doctors, but less doctors. So there's room to see her head turned looking into a mirror, but everything in the mirror is we don't have time to do original art right now, Nabby. So we have to select from the artwork that we have. And that's going to be because we have to deliver this by Friday. So we have a deadline on this of Friday. There's knives and pickles appearing in the chat. I don't believe that's on topic, but perhaps this is turning into a cooking channel stream. I'm not sure. What is your favorite bread and butter pickle recipe, especially those of you living in underground bunkers in World War II London, because preserving your vegetables would be a very important survival skill to have. Octo Chicken says, not sure how I feel about iconic to describe anything here. Yeah, it's a fair point. Pickle Rick has now appeared in the chat. I feel like this is devolving.
I cause problems with iconic, sorry.
Yeah, it's okay, Magus. One of the issues is that a lot of times when we're writing, we tend to want to describe the thing we're writing about in the same way we feel excited about it. And so we'll say things that are hyperbolic or that are they're basically sales words. And as a general rule, so if you go and you read like Stephen King, the book called On Writing, he has quite a bit of space devoted to this. What we typically try to do is we remove all superfluous language. Martin will tell you that when we're writing together, I oftentimes remind him of this rule, and that is essentially that if you don't need a word, don't include it, and then secondly, don't put, I guess, what you'd call marketing language in. So even to write out a description as like, we're going to make the best game. People, especially people who read pitches all day, they see something like that, and if they don't immediately discard it, they will at least roll their eyes. So you don't generally go out of your way to describe the stuff you're doing with hyperbole or with what's the word I'm looking for? It's sort of like grandeur modifiers, you know. But that's a live and learn, you know. It's one of the reasons we do these sessions is so that we can kind of talk about those things as well. So there are no wrong suggestions here. And Magus, I think you're doing great.
I just find it funny. I am literally listening to On Writing today.
Oh, there you go. It's an excellent book, and I very highly recommend that to everyone who's joining into these sessions, because there's a lot of rules that we can use from that series, from that book, that will apply to almost everything we're doing here, from when we finally get down to writing dialogue all the way back to where we are now, which is writing a pitch document. Okay. So I'm trying to read through some comments here. Ice Killer says, American, can we do the poll again like we did for the Magic Shroom print just to see? Yeah, we could do a poll, Ice Killer. I don't know that I trust the results of our polls, or if anybody else does.
If you do it on Patreon, I think that's going to be the best way to go about that. Because I think it's limited to Patreon. Patron has 1 vote.
Yeah, but I'm a little more concerned, like, about the investment that people make in the decision, and the group, I think, that are here listening to this conversation right now have maybe a deeper understanding of why a particular image should or wouldn't work. Whereas if we simply ask the question for people on Patreon who've not been involved in this conversation right now, they might just select like, hey, that's my favorite, but it doesn't necessarily serve the goals that we've outlined here.
Good point.
So I think we could come out of this talk with everybody in the chat here, and maybe once the talk is over, you could all go aside and you can kind of chat, and then you can send me a list of what came out of your art selection battle. Connor says, Late but Lucky had a great point. Breaking people's preconceived notions about Alice in Wonderland is hugely important. I think many people would assume your game is basically this. Yeah, I think that is a bit of a concern, but I think that the presentation that we've got here, you know, we can counter that pretty cleanly with the art selection, which, you know, it's one of the reasons why I wanted that, her in the asylum with the head shaved, because that says distressed, that says something's not right. But then as we scroll through the rest of this document, we're not hitting those notes hard enough. So I think we are all on the same page there. Every one of the images that is in this document needs to be disturbing. It needs to describe the distressed nature of the product. So for instance, we scroll all the way to the last page, we've got Alice standing there with knife in hand, but there's no blood on her dress. Where's the frickin' blood, right? There's blood splatter on the pages of the document, but we could actually, maybe crank that up in a few places because I see it's on a few pages. There's quite a lot of blood streaming down the first page, but maybe we need to crank up the horror of this document. And yeah, Connor, you're fired for posting the Disney stuff onto our Discord server. That's a killing offense. Okay, let's see here. Scrolling through your comments. Fight to the death over art. Yes, and take pictures of the gory results of that. We can use those in the document as well. Okay. So if we continue past the story page, so we're now looking at page 3. If you look at the number at the bottom of the page, we are going to gore this up a bit. I think page 4, so we're turning the page now. I think we're going to do a full page of art, again, with that art needing to cement the horror aspect of what we're talking about here. So moving on past that, we are to the game loop. So we described the game loop as being made up of 5 core elements. Those would be narrative, exploration, combat, puzzles, and spatial challenges. Now, it is my belief that these are the 5 core elements of the Alice games. I mean, they essentially are action platformers. I think maybe one of the other things put in here as a kind of element would be perhaps wonder and horror. I don't know if there's a word that combines together those two concepts, but underpinning all of this, the loop theme is what we've put here. That is curiosity plus discovery. And my hope there is that we are explaining to the person who's reading this that that's sort of what drives the design that we're going to do for the levels, for instance, is constantly pulling the player forward through curiosity and a desire for discovery. So if you have any comments on what we've described as the core game loop elements, do let me know. If you have a better idea for how we would encapsulate the horror elements of the core game loop, I mean, if that's even appropriate, because the narrative could contain horror, exploration can contain horror. All of these things can be kind of horror, spiced with a bit of horror, but I don't know if adding a distinct horror section in here makes sense, but it might, especially if the publisher that we're talking to is specifically interested in horror. So something to think about there.
Maybe there just add general themes of horror, such and such under the gameplay loop, because you can say horror narrative, horror explanation, creepy. Every one of those could be asterisked with horror.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I think just having it either in the loop or in the theme, or like you said, in the points down below in one of those. But certainly if you were to take the game loop section that we've created here and just put it aside, it would be difficult to suggest that this is even at all related to a psychological horror game. Nothing in it says horror right now. So I think we could fix that up. Connor's fired. Yeah, he'll be back. He'll resurrect. Let's see, what else have we got here? Alice on Elm Street says, maybe replacing Cheshire Kitten. Do we have an image of a broken baby doll that we could enlarge and put in the corner? Yeah, that's exactly right. We want to get something off-putting, horrifying in there. Late but Lucky says, oh, it might be important to mention explicitly the game's rating. That's a very good point. So let's do that. I'll put a note here, maybe on the what is the game page. Game is rated M for macabre. Okay. Good point, late but lucky. Cover art, story, game pages all clarify it's horror. Krim says the cover art, the story, and game pages all clarify it's horror, so the game loop section need not contain flavor information like genre. I think that's fair, but one of my concerns is that you might have somebody who is in a meeting, a group of executives in a meeting, and I've seen it before. What they'll do is they'll absorb the cover art and then they'll flip to like the third page and they'll scan that page, and then their entire takeaway will be from something that they saw or didn't see on that one page, which is one of the reasons why we might want to reinforce some of the core themes on every single one of the pages. But that's a fair point, though, Krim. Just scrolling through your comments again. Mash Q to spray blood. Yes, Luca, that's a great idea. Wendy says, "Don't worry, Connor. Alice's family fired too. Har har." Wendy. Carbon says, "I think having actual horror, gore, blood up front can look tacky and repulsive during business evaluation, but something like this art is moving while still attractant to attention. This is an Ellen Johnson work. Not saying make new art, but try to maintain this balance of macabre, paranormal with tact for business proposal." Connor, I would also agree with this. One of my concerns is that the people we're pitching to, they don't understand subtle. And so I think, the point is taken. We'll try not to push this too far, but I still think that having a little note of it on every page would be useful. That's one of the weirdnesses in the games industry is like, it's, what's the phrase, like, a nun on the street, but a hooker in bed type of thing. Like, that's essentially what a lot of these game companies are like to Wall Street and to the media. They want to pretend that they're not, in fact, gambling loot box, addiction-driven companies, nor that they are making games primarily about blood and violence and shooting people and like mass murders. But then to the gamers, they want to present that, hey, yeah, we're all about gambling, murder, hooker, homicide, whatever. So it depends on who we're pitching, like who's actually in the room, because I've been in places where the CEO of the company is busy telling everybody that like we don't make M-rated games about hooker massacres. Meanwhile, like the actual games are like hooker massacre games. So that's a big kind of challenge, is that a lot of times the marketing and the development of the games is connected from the stated goals of the business, and it's really difficult to know who you're pitching because these proposals go in and they'll just go wherever, and we don't have any control over that. So Octa Chicken says splattering blood everywhere is not exactly. I agree 100% with that comment. But as Connor is saying, something of the surreal and unsettling would sell the atmosphere better. I agree with that. Magus posts up this picture of the horror funhouse, and I think that's a really good example of like kind of horror, but it's not like blood splattered everywhere. So that might be a good thing to have. Actually, that image as a cover image might be good because it kind of suggests that like, hey, we're going to go on a ride through a bunch of horror house stuff. So that could work. We've all been fired, it appears. Okay, we're moving. So I haven't seen any other comments on game loop, but I'll just read through these points really quick. We are suggesting that the game loop and the kind of primary game design is going to focus around having generous checkpoints and non-threatening progression. That is because I do believe we have a fairly wide potential audience. That is, there could be some pretty hardcore gamers, but there's also going to be some novice gamers in there. So we're not trying to make like super hardcore, unforgiving game.
Dark Souls of Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah, we're not making a Dark Souls clone. And I would even imagine that like at some point we're all going to sit down and we're going to need to have that conversation, like where along the spectrum between Dark Souls to God of War to Zelda do we live in terms of forgiveness. And I don't know if how many of you saw, like, there was that recent dissection of the first two Alice games by some sort of commentator guy on YouTube. And he made the point that he was really happy that when he fell into the abyss, he just sort of like immediately magically reappeared and wasn't forced to suffer through reloading and scolding for having died. So that kind of stuff's really important to me, and that's the main reason behind this first point here. Curated linear level design combined with exploration and discovery. So this is kind of trying to go to the point of my having recently talked a bit about an open worldy kind of feel, and I know we might have got a little bit of pushback on that. So ultimately these are going to be linear designs to the levels, especially the combat and the puzzle sections. If we do have more kind of open worldy stuff, it's going to be highly dependent on technology and budget, and it may be that we have sort of programmatically generated content for some very particular areas, but I don't think we're going to mention that stuff in here just yet. Loosely connected central hub, we've talked about that. That's going to be the train station. Each area is self-contained, is a self-contained world into itself. That's all about like the themes within an area and how they the theme within an area hangs together. And then you enter and exit out of those very specific areas, and the art and the story and the characters that are contained within those. And then the off main path loops. That's mainly there to try to give us a sense that it has an open world feeling, even though it's not really. And then fast travel. So being able to move back and forth between some of these areas, especially if we're going to have shops and an ability for you to trade things you've collected, like chaos coins, into a shop for weapon or clothing upgrades. And then gating via difficulty of enemies. So the idea here is just to be able to travel to some of the more advanced sections of the games. We're just going to get our asses kicked if we're not really ready to be there yet. So that is the outline of the game loop stuff and sort of the details that make it work. If there's anybody who's got any comments on that. I'm seeing who else has been fired. Connor says, yes, David Jaffe and the Twisted Metal series, that's all about Hooker Massacre vibe. Yeah. Changes display name to Hooker Massacre. There you go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 Doom has got to go. It's a very interesting name there. Just reading through your comments really quickly here. Connor says, yeah, I think the game should be a 6.5 out of 10. That's very specific on the difficulty of mechanics scale or less, not a 3.5 like a fluffy Disney Alice game, but still, yeah, you and I are on the same page there. Connor, I agree, 6.5, maybe 6.4, but that sounds like the right neighborhood for where we want to be in terms of difficulty. Octochicken says, roughly where God of War sits, able to be completed by nearly anyone, but with further challenges if one desires. Yes, that is right, Octochicken. So Krim says, reading the points on page 4 of the doc helps a bit. I have no clue either, just what I feel on each. This is in reference to not understanding what a game loop is about. And we did describe this earlier, that the game loop is sort of the underlying collection of mechanics and content that's delivered that basically makes up what is a game. Greg says, grammar-wise, should the train station description be after the first mention of the central hub? Yes, that's fine. I can move that up. Okay. I think we're good here. So we're going to move on. Game session length. I guess I'd like to open this up to a question also, is that we have here game session length, session lengths being 1 to 3 hours. I just made that up because it's sort of like how much time I'm willing to devote to session lengths on average. I'd be curious to know if that's kind of a shared experience, or also while we're on this topic, I'm curious to know how big do we think this game is? Like, if I told you that Asylum was going to be 20 hours for a sort of average player at normal difficulty, what do we think about that? I know that's highly dependent on how replayable the game is. I think that Madness Returns came in, I think it was around 20 hours. So yeah, open that up for some comments. Is session length?
Yeah, I think 1 to 3 hours probably sits about exactly where I like to play. Even on the best games, you need to take a little break sometimes, so I don't usually venture much beyond that session length.
Yeah,
For
and then about...
session,
Go ahead.
for session time, I think 30 minutes is a general good chunk where I'm done with work, I just need 30 minutes to sit down, relax, and just, before everything hits the fan with dinner or whatever. So I think an hour might be a little much at times when, some people, especially who grew up with the original Alice, have gotten a little bit on the older side and have those responsibilities in adulting. So
yeah, I think so. Krim makes a good point here. Says that Madness Returns was a bit stretched in some chapters, and I agree with that. It was one of the reasons why I wish we had time to polish on Madness Returns, because we knew that it was kind of flabby in some areas, and we could have fixed it, but we ran out of time. Our session was up, so I do hope we'll avoid that with the new game. I don't know about you, but I like to play my games for hours, says Asteria. Late but Lucky says, I'm willing to play a game at any length, as long as the story and content don't suffer for it. If it ends up being 30 hours, there should be enough content to fill every minute that doesn't make it lull, or give me a quest that takes a while but doesn't make it repetitive. If it's only 6 hours, it better be an incredible 6 hours. Yeah, I think we're all on the same page there. I mean, this is why I think one of these, some of these questions, they really require a bit more detail and discussion, and yet we're forced to state ours will be a 30-hour game. Well, you could make a 30-hour game out of a button on a screen that says press this button, but then like every time you try to do it, the button moves, right? That could be a really, yeah, I mean, it's a horrible, terrible game, but it is a game, and it did take you 30 hours to finally click that button. So anyway, we do have to fill these blanks in, but it sounds like we're all kind of on the same page here. If Asylum ends up being sort of 20 to 30 hours in total length, and our sessions are 1 to 3 hours, then we're probably good here. So
it looks like Connor has something to say with his sultry voice.
Oh boy, I'm getting ready. We're all waiting on Connor. For those of you who've not joined us before, prepare your ears for eargasms.
Huh, maybe it's not working.
It is working.
There you are.
Okay, there we go. All right. I better never have a sore throat when I jump on here. You guys are going to be so disappointed. All right, so my role in this little community has kind of always just been to add left field comments and supplementary information to make sure we're considering everything we can. So I just had another one of those things. And so it's on the topic we were just talking about, which I have ADD, so just give me a second to remind myself.
I thought your role was to soothe and massage our ears with sexy
my role
sounds.
is so many things. It's so many things to annoy people, post memes, soothing, and supplementary info. So I just remembered. Okay, so we're talking about game length, and I totally agree with. I mean, I think any player out there would say, if I bought a game, especially if you're aiming for a not too much DLC, not too much, secondary purchases type title, everyone's naturally going to think, the longer the campaign, the better, as long as it's packed out and has no lulls in it. So I definitely agree with all that. But what I wanted to add was, I don't know if it's just me, but I personally, especially in recent years with the way games have been, there's more of a focus on kind of to be in the game without necessarily playing its core element. Does anyone agree with that? Like, I feel like there's a lot of games where you're like, you go on there to say, I don't know, make a map, or or there's a social tab, or you're just going like theater mode, and Halo is a great example. Or obviously multiplayer is the most obvious reason, but so I hope we're considering in terms of design uh, any elements like that just want to it's not necessarily just here's a main menu, go play the game, when you're done quit the game, goodbye. I hope there's some elements of this that are almost just to put a label on it, I'm just going to say community elements, or um what, experiential, that's not the right word, supplementary, I'll just say that word again. Supplementary elements. I just saw your fat. Supplementary elements of the game.
Yeah, I think we all would like that, and I think one of the challenges, is what is that makes sense in Wonderland. Someone wrote in here fishing, and it seems kind of silly or funny on the surface, but the reality is that, and I don't remember which game it was in the Zelda or Mario series, but there literally it was like fishing, and you'd go into the game and you just go and fish, and it was like it was really relaxing and fun. Um, or somebody's saying but Lucky's saying like Minecraft. It's one of the reasons why I was kind of wondering like how will we be successful in trying to pull off a programmatically created wilds of Wonderland area that every time you go back in, it's changed a little bit, and we can give the player a reason for being there, and say like collecting chaos coins, or chasing down and murdering hookers, and whatever makes sense in the context of that area. So we ought to figure that out.
That'd be absolutely fantastic. Like Zombies Run, a mobile game where you run and it's a story where they're talking as if you're running away from zombies. They have missions and missions and missions, but they also have what they call radio mode, which basically just means as soon as you've been done with all the missions, even if you beat them all, you can go back and you could still go on a run, and they have this pre-recorded where they're talking as if it's a radio station, in their little game world for the runners out there. Um, so yeah, definitely something like that. It's
Well,
basically the equivalent of what you just said.
one of the things about the story that we're creating here about Asylum is that the one of the conceits in the narrative is that Alice, young Alice, has actually been in this place for all of the years that adult Alice went off to fight in the war. And so we have a hook there for explaining why you would continue to go back and over and over and over and over again fight, and obviously we need to make it interesting, but if we could build that in from the beginning, that hey, it's like in Inception, when like they went a little bit further down in the levels, they could be down there for years, while in reality only a few minutes passed. Well, we kind of already have a hook for that. So I am wondering, how could we reuse the levels we build or the enemies that we create to present something where it's sort of like uh, an infinity of shooting galleries around this content. So we ought to figure that out.
Or just make a card game like Gwent, so you can make a mobile spin-off and blah blah blah.
Well, if you could read tarot, then maybe.
I was thinking that actually. I was like, wow, they should do like a tarot spin-off game that just uses the common tarot deck, and then everyone who owns a tarot deck can play their own version of the Madness in Wonderland tarot-ish game that's in the game. And there you go. Then you're doing what is that called? When you're telling stories and stuff through multiple mediums, transmedia. Then you have a transmedia franchise.
Right. Yeah, I mean,
Dishonored actually did that.
having something like that, where sort of playing the game somehow, like you could sit down for one of these little quickie sessions, and in the course of a half hour, the way in which you approach a particular area actually outputs a fortune for the day, because you happen to kill a certain ratio of tarot cards, and then at the end it's like you killed 20 cups and this many joker, fools. So your output, your generated tarot reading for today is bleh. And now everybody goes in there to do their reading every day. that's not a great idea, but anyway. Okay, so I think we're good on session length and ear sex. Maybe we move on to the next page, which is page 5.
Sounds good. I'll see you guys next time.
Thank you.
Alrighty. So page 5, this gets into the request from this potential partner for exactly how we're going to execute on the start of building something. So in the parlance of game development, there's something in here that's quite critical, and that is a vertical slice. So a vertical slice is it is essentially if you were to say that you've built an entire game that is a 30-hour experience and it has all of its features and it has all of its areas, and now you went and you took a slice out of it that's say like an hour, and it's representative of the game loop and of the story and the session lengths. And so the challenge for the developer is to pretend like that whole 30-hour game has been done, all the animations, all the weapons, all the particles, but we're only showing an hour of it. And you then present that to the publisher or the financier, and they look at it and they say, this is representative of the final product. I really like this. Therefore, here's the rest of the money. Go make the rest of the game. This is a big challenge for developers because it requires selecting an area that is representative and yet somehow doesn't cost the same as making the entire game to represent the entire game in the space of an hour. So that is what this production plan essentially proposes. Again, it's one of those things where any publisher or developer, or sorry, any publisher or financier who's asking for this, this is always going to look almost exactly the same, regardless of what project and what team they're talking to. But anyway, what we've got here is that we're going to split our production between a team that we already have here in Shanghai, who are able to do programming and the wrangling of data. That is, they take the 3D assets and they put those into levels, and then they combine that with the character models and the animations and the particles and everything else. So that's the team in Shanghai. And then for asset production, we're looking at an outsourcer in Bangkok called YGG. We went and visited them a couple months back when we were doing the Thailand due diligence trip. So we are in the pre-production phase right now. It's the current phase. And then we're looking at doing a vertical slice design phase. So that is essentially taking everything we know the game to be and then selecting an area from the game and saying this is going to be where we explore and represent what the whole rest of the game is going to look like. I'm thinking that area of focus would be the opening of the game all the way through chaos, but I'm not sure about that just yet because that section doesn't actually contain a lot of the combat elements, and that would be it would be wrong of us not to show off core combat and some of the game loop elements that are on the previous page. But anyway, we need to define where story that's being told. We would need to do level layout. We'd have to do up a assets requirement, a production plan, and so that would take us about a month. Any questions or concerns about what's presented here? Moving, yeah.
No, I was just going to say it's important that people understand the vertical slice and how it's been used in the past too, of making sure the game looks like you want it to look. And at E3 especially, people have seen a vertical slice and turns out the game isn't like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a big controversy online around Madness Returns as well, because some footage leaked out that showed elements of the game that I think took place in London, and there was kind of rooftop running sequence, and a lot of people were like, why didn't that end up in the final game? And what they don't realize is that was all set dressing. It was sort of, if you turned the camera away from what we wanted you to see at any moment, you would have seen empty space. There was nothing there. There was no there. It was just exactly what we needed to put in place to make the camera work to move through those areas to build the video to send to EA. And so, yeah, vertical slice. There's a lot of trickery that goes on because you're trying to fake out what the final product's going to look like so that you can give someone a sense of that. But the reality is that in order to do a proper vertical slice, you essentially need to build the whole game. And then that sort of defeats the purpose because it would cost you all the money.
I think for the vertical slice, you should select a location or one of the aspects of grief to focus on. So you can say this is the anger or bargaining, more in line with where the game is at. And that also showcases the dealing with PTSD as well.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, when I was thinking about this, I was thinking to have Alice's encounter with the queen would be really good. And to have her have the White Rabbit companion taken away and be told that, hey, you've got to go confront the Mad Hatter. That whole sort of sequence of events, I think, could be quite compelling. And it's also a good idea to leave the player with a cliffhanger at the end of a vertical slice. So it's very similar to sort of like a pilot episode for a TV show. You want to leave them wanting more. And I think that maybe the queen/anger area would be good for that. Okay. Just reading through your comments really quickly to make sure I've not missed anything important.
It's divulged into Dragon Age.
Yeah, I'm having a very difficult time interpreting this quickly. I don't know what's going on. Why? But it does look like most people understand what a vertical slice is, so that's good. All right. Next section down is when we would actually get into vertical slice development. We're stating here that would take us about 6 months, and again, split between the two models. This is actually just sort of sketched out. I probably need to put a little more detail into this. And then we're stating that we would deliver the finished vertical slice at month 7. So normally during vertical slice production, we'd be working to our production plan. There's also a bit of a discovery process going on because you sort of want there to be some sort of invention within your vertical slice production that surprises both you and your audience. So that could be something like, I think it was the butterfly dodge that came out of our vertical slice with Madness Returns, and we were all really kind of like, I don't know, impressed with it, even with our own, like how much fun that was. And it happened because our animators were complaining that they couldn't do the transition for dodge fast enough, and that the state transition from like an idle animation through a roll to back for combat ready was causing them all kinds of grief, and it just looked really bad. And so at some point someone decided, like, well, screw the animations and let's just vanish and reappear. And then somebody threw a cloud of butterflies in there, and it was like, wow, that's done it, that's fixed it, that's amazing. And everybody was happy except for our animators, who were like, that didn't fix it, you just got rid of our animation. And so we had to kill them all. So yeah, we're hoping that we'll discover something like that in the process of this vertical slice process, and then we'll make the slice itself. We will define and deliver core animation and movement and weapons, all that kind of good stuff. So there you go. Final page we're getting to here, unless there's any comments on what's outlined on this production plan page. It looks like the answer is no. Connor says, dude, the butterfly dodge is exactly the kind of thing that makes an Alice game magical, because it uses absurdism to symbolize normal things, and that's the whole point of an Alice in Wonderland concept, absurdity. Yeah, Connor, so on the topic of absurdity, one of the things I shared recently on our Patreon was that non-Euclidean geometry demo. So it looks very much like kind of MC Escher type stuff, and I think that this is something else I'd really want to focus on, stress in our vertical slice delivery, is the idea that the geometry of our levels, one, it's very busted up and there's like all kinds of stuff floating around, but two, there's a lot of that portal / teleporting / scale changing and non-Euclidean geometry going on. And that we really heavily emphasize that in the vertical slice, because I don't think there's enough games out there that have sold on that topic before. Savral, welcome Savral. I don't think we've ever seen you in the chat before. Says, American McGee, will there be a demo for backers to try / critique? I backed Bloodstained, and the demo they put out at first was just terrible. Iga heard, oh, I guess that's the developer. Iga heard the complaints and reworked it, and now it's amazing. Would love to see input from backers testers on the game for demo. So yes, several, that is actually the point of our Patreon. And if you're backing, I don't know what the appropriate tier is, but somewhere in there, there's a tier that says you get to be a tester. The reality is that because we've received a lot of backing from a lot of Patreon or patrons, what I'd like to do is that at some point we're just going to say that, right, anybody who's done like a lifetime backing of $50 or more or $100 or more, I don't know what the number is, we'll make it something low and reasonable. Anybody at that number and below is going to be automatically included in the testing group. And then there will be another number, you know, maybe it's lifetime support of like $100 or $200, something. That group is all of them just going to get the game. Because I feel like that's fair, especially for our long time and higher level people who've backed and continue to back. So yeah, we haven't outlined that stuff yet, but it is something that is always in the back of my mind because I am incredibly humbled by and appreciative of all the support and love that we get from our insane children. Ice Killer says Patreon promises a demo. Yeah, it does. Okay, further comments here. I think we're good. Several says, excellent, thank you for answering my question. It's nice to hear another developer willing to listen to its fan base. I'm a backer, so I look forward to it. Well, thank you. Appreciate your support, Several. Okay, we're gonna move on. We're almost to the final page here. So we have section 6, that is the tech decision. Really not much to describe here. We use Unreal for the last game, and the page actually explains why we would do it for the next game. That we already have some of our engineers and level designers from the previous game, and they are still here in Shanghai, and they all have tremendous amounts of Unreal experience. We also in close proximity to and good friends with the guys at Epic China, and of course they would support us and champion our using their tech. The reality is that here in China, almost all development is moving to Unreal. And that's actually kind of a global trend that the other engine makers in the world are having to fight against, is that it's sort of homogenizing like the entire world of game development, at least when you're using a third-party engine solution. You know, say you had a choice between Unreal or Unity, a lot of developers are sliding towards Unreal these days. And then of course you have the boutique or the in-house engines, say like Frostbite at EA or Lumberyard at Amazon. But even if we were asked to use Lumberyard, we probably wouldn't. And if we somehow ended up in a situation where we could use the Frostbite engine, I don't think we would, because we don't have the experience with it that we might need. So yeah, we're using Unreal. This does bring us up to a point, and that is a lot of people are concerned about the Epic Store and this whole question of exclusivity. We've not been approached by or even talked to Epic on this point, and none of the people that we're currently talking to would be interested in that sort of arrangement. So I don't think that that's an issue that we need to concern ourselves with right now. Anybody got any other questions or concerns about tech or Unreal or Epic? Late but Lucky says, oh, God bless. Exclusivity kills games, in my honest opinion. I'm glad that there's still some of the same people, says Late but Lucky, who are working on the game. AMR was such a gorgeous game, and I'm really happy to hear that I'll hopefully be able to feel the background cohesiveness between AMR and AA. Yep. It's a good one. Connor Carbon says, haha, yeah, Epic exclusive for a year, and literally everyone's hating on it. Yeah, I mean, just my personal opinion is that I think Epic found themselves a massive, incredible PR disaster on the launch of their store, and I don't want to get anywhere near it because it's just a very stinky giant pile of burning garbage. This whole topic, but I don't think that people having online stores is necessarily bad, but clearly they've mismanaged the way that they've communicated what their store is about, and so yeah, big fail on their part there. Alice on Elm Street says, I would love a remastered game one day. Yes, Alice on Elm Street, we are trying to do something along those lines. Nebula says, will we get a bundle of all 3 games? We are trying to do that. It's really, I've said many times, a question of the particular publisher financier and their willingness to support the financial investment into getting that work done. And whether or not we're just doing a port or it's an upgraded version of the games or a remaster, we don't know just yet. So we're going to work on that a bit. Octo Chicken says, overall, I think this pitch covers the needs quite effectively. Swap some art, add a few of the words ideas discussed here, and I think we're good to go. Yes, Greg, that is a great way to wrap this up. I think we're also pretty good to go here. I really appreciate the feedback that all of you've provided. So let's head towards wrapping this up because we are coming up on almost 2 hours. Do send along your suggestions for the art replacements. And I have a couple of notes here on grammar and phrasing, space phrasing even. If anybody has any other comments that they feel are really critical, you can post them up here on Patreon. On Discord. Maybe one of you collect all that and then you can just email it to me. You can send it to mysterious@americanmcgee.com, and I'll collect all that stuff together and make sure it makes it into the document. Okay, I don't know why, but there's a red shopping cart in the chat now.
The joke about Epic not having a shopping cart.
I see. Krim says, not relevant to the tech, but a question about the film rights. Are they still with Buffy? No, Krim. In fact, that was maybe 10 plus years ago. They currently reside with a company, I think it's called Abandon Films, which is owned by a woman named Karen Lauder of the Estee Lauder clan. And they're just kind of sat over there doing nothing with them. So we do try to talk with them and see if there's something that could be done from time to time. But again, this just comes down to someone's got to throw money at it, and that's what we're working on right now. Okay, Luca needs to take a shower. That's great, Luca. I think we all need to take a shower. And we're going to probably wrap it up here, unless anybody's got any other really critical questions. Okay, well, this has been episode 15 of yet another one of our crowd design sessions, which we do host on our Discord server. If you would like to join us for a future session, do check out the links in the description below. Being a person who can access our Discord server is a feature, a perk of being an insane child on our Patreon. And so the link to that is found in the description below. If you are listening along on YouTube, I hope you've not been commenting live in the comments below, but if you do comment at all, we will read those comments later on. And we do appreciate you being there. Big thanks and a shout out to our mods, especially Asteria Visual, who is going to AV club this into the upload for YouTube, and also to all of our insane children for their support and their amazing creative and brilliant comments that they bring to these sessions. I think that's about it. Anybody else got anything to say? Pickle Rick? Jib it up? Font Lord?
Get bent.
Get bent. All right, everybody. Well, that's it. We will see you again for the next session. So until then, get bent.
Governor.
Ciao.
Good night.